Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
Hello everyone, welcome to Cripy News. I'm your host and resident Cripy, the Pinkcrusader, and today we're talking about the bane of all wheelchair users everywhere. New parents. I'm pretty sure that will upset some people, but I think it's something that needs to be said. More people need to hear it. So first off, we'll start with the article that sparked this story. It's a story on BuzzFeed, and I know what you're saying. BuzzFeed? BuzzFeed? Yeah, BuzzFeed, because it's as ideological as BuzzFeed can be, and as misleading as a lot of their stuff can be. Oftentimes, because of BuzzFeed's particular bent on what they deem important stories, they often cover things that other news media won't, and that often includes disability type stuff. So you have to be careful with what you read on BuzzFeed, but it can be a good starting point for a lot of discussions. And it's pretty much the only good thing about BuzzFeed. But let's get into this. So, a disabled man has won his wheelchair versus buggy court case. So, wheelchair user Doug Pauly was prevented from boarding a bus to Leeds in 2012 when a mother with a pram refused to leave the area reserved for wheelchairs and pushchairs. So, basically, what he was saying is a new mom with a baby, the child, who had like a stroller or a buggy, as they call them, pushed them, got into the bus, and took up the spaces that are designated for wheelchair users. And this actually happens quite a lot, partly because for some reason, accommodation for people with wheelchairs often includes accommodating new parents. And this happens in bathrooms and buses and other public transportation and other building spaces as well. Any place that's designated for a wheelchair, new parents also use. And for some reason get away with using it. Apparently they have the right to, but clearly they're douchebags. At least that's what I get. And I think part of it is the problem because disabled bathrooms often have the baby changing station in the bathroom. And here's the issue I have with that. So your baby could be changed, anywhere. It's not that big of a deal. You go into the bathroom, if there's a place up front with the baby changing table, whoop-de-freaking do. You change it right there. Nobody's going to check your baby's junk out. Nobody cares. But no, they put them in the accessible stall. And here's the problem with that. I, as a paralyzed person, lack the ability of being able to hold it if I have to go to the bathroom. So that means when I have to pee, I have to pee. And if I have to wait, I might pee myself. It's also another issue that I have with people who are perfectly, ambulatory using those things because what you're doing is you're saying, let's say you're in a public restroom. There's one accessible stall, one, which is your normal amount. Sometimes there's two, but usually there's only one. And there's usually like a bunch of other regular, toilet stalls. So you could wait and use any one of these. I can use that one, which means no matter when you got in there, I have to wait for you to come out. I don't have to wait for one to open up like you would have to wait for. I have to wait for that specific one. And it's a medical thing for me. It's not, if I have to pee for an overlong period of time, not only am I going to pee myself, but I'm going to get something known as autonomic dysreflexia, which means my blood pressure is going to rise. I'm going to get goosebumps and cold sweats. I'm going to start getting blotchy skin and itchy. If it goes on long enough, I could have a stroke. This is a serious problem for me, and your convenience is kind of a dick move. But anyway, back to this story. Disabled people should be given priority access to wheelchair spaces on buses. The Supreme Court has ruled. You damn skippy it should. They should. Doug Pauly brought his case after he was prevented from getting on a bus to Leeds in 2012 because a mother with a sleeping child refused to move her pushchair from a space reserved for wheelchairs and buggies. So, maybe your child's asleep, alright? Maybe it's asleep and you want to keep it that way. So, your convenience of not waking up your child basically means I can't ride the bus right now? That's what you're saying to me? New parents need to pull their heads out of their ass because your child is not the center of the universe. Other people would like to access public space too. And if you have the ability to move them and allow someone to get on, you should fucking do it. Sorry if this is sounding a little bit harsh, but this is actually kind of a thing, something that bothers me. I don't have any kids myself, but my brother and my sister do, and neither of them would be willing to take up spaces for me or for someone in a wheelchair just so their kids didn't have to sit on their lap or something. I mean, come on, there are other ways of doing this. So speaking outside court, Pauly said he was elated by the judgment, which campaigners called a victory for disabled people's rights, which I think it might be. It sets a precedent, because this means that other cases that are brought up like this in certain areas will have this one to look back on and say, see, look, you can't just, tell us we're not allowed to be here simply because you have a kid. That's just not the way this is going to work anymore. New parent, sorry. So judges at the Supreme Court overturned a previous ruling that people in wheelchairs did not have legal priority for pushchairs. They said bus company First Group's policy of requiring a driver to merely request a non-wheelchair user vacate the reserved space without taking any further steps was unjustified. Where a driver who has made such a request concludes that a refusal is unreasonable, he or she should consider some further steps to pressure the non-wheelchair user to vacate the space, depending on the circumstances, the judgment states. The Nuremberg president of the court said bus drivers should consider refusing to drive off unless non-wheelchair users moved to another part of the bus. And that's the thing, is there are other parts of the bus, generally speaking, that people with a child in a stroller or a buggy could use. There's nothing that says that they can't take up the middle space of a bus. They can. It's legal for them to do so. Having them constantly take up a spot designated for people in chairs is just ridiculous. It's just dumb. Because when a person is on a chair and sitting in a chair in a moving vehicle, it can be quite dangerous for us to do so. So the reason why those spaces are designated for us is because they're spaces that we can actually utilize that are less dangerous for us to use. If I'm sitting in this chair and a bus takes off, I could tip over, regardless of whether my brakes are on or not. It's just something that can happen. There's a lot of force in a bus, and it will tip me over. I have to be in a specific spot. So let's move on. Pauly, who is in his late 30s, was awarded damages due to unlawful discrimination by First Group in 2012, but that decision was overturned by the Court of Appeals, which said it would be a step too far to require bus drivers to remove non-wheelchair users from the space reserved for wheelchairs and buggies. Now, I don't necessarily know that damages should be awarded, but whatever the case, if it's legal for them to be awarded damages, they were basically discriminated against. This is the type of accidental discrimination that I was talking about. It wasn't designed for this to happen, and the policies and stuff aren't designed in a way that makes it inherently discriminatory, but it often is. And it's usually the actions of private citizens, not the group, the bus company themselves. I mean, I don't think it would be an okay thing to forcibly remove someone from the bus just because of this. But at the same time, these people should probably face some serious social pressure to move. If the bus isn't going, if the bus driver will refuse or is not allowed to move unless that person moves, then well, quite frankly, they're probably going to move because A, they want to get to their destination, B, everyone else on the bus wants to get to their destination, and they're looking at this person as a dickhead because they are a dickhead at this point. So it says it's an amazing day for the rights of disabled people, he said outside the Supreme Court. Traveling on buses is a fundamental thing that most people expect to be able to do. It happens too frequently that disabled people struggle to get on the buses. Today's verdict should mean that there is a major difference in the attitude of bus companies, that there is a requirement to require somebody that doesn't need the space to move. So yeah, this should have already been a thing, in my opinion. Anytime someone is taking a space that is designed for someone to have access to something that they have no other option of, they should be forced to move. I mean, you're basically saying my right to sit wherever the fuck I want is more important than your right to be able to access public spaces. There are some people that are just super self-righteous and see that type of thing as like a privilege for me when there's really no other option for me. There's a big difference between um, an accommodation that is a necessity and an accommodation that is a privilege. For example, I'll give you an example of one that is a privilege. When I go to the bank, the line for the tellers I could easily wait in, but my bank uh, puts me off to the side. Now I usually end up waiting a certain amount of time anyway, but the reason they do that is because there's only one window that's low enough, and they so it's the only one that I can go to. But in essence, it's it's kind of okay because usually uh, the majority of the time when I go to the banks, there's not someone manning that window, so someone from another window has to come over. So I could easily wait in that other line and then do this. But part of the reason they don't do that is because um, in certain respects, it speeds up their flow of people going through there because there are people with disabilities that that take longer for doing certain types of things. So if we're not in the direct line, that line moves better. That's usually how it works. So while it might not be a necessity and it's more of a privilege, oftentimes businesses see it as a good move because it just makes things flow better in the way they conduct their business and how they get people in and out faster for certain things. It's the same way with like the TSA. There's a reason why I get skipped to the head of the line because I'm going to be waiting there and I have to be taken off every time to be searched. Every time. And me getting through that line is not an easy thing. So they don't want to hold people up from getting to their planes or anything like that. So they moved me off to the side. I have no problem with that. I usually get to go ahead of some people in line. It takes me less time to get through on average because they want the line itself to be able to continue to move faster than if lots of disabled people were waiting in that line. That's just how it works. It may seem like a privilege, and in some cases it is, but it's a privilege for a reason, and it's a reason based on the company, not necessarily for my ease. It's for the ease of them. But in cases like this, where there is no other option, this is not a privilege, it's a necessity. If we want to ride the bus, it's not like we can get into any regular spot. It's the only one available. So, but ultimately, this is a really positive judgment, 5 years in the making, with a lot of support from a lot of people. It's just amazing, and hopefully, it should make a major difference. And I don't know about what happens in the UK, but I know at least in the United States with the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, oftentimes, even though that's been in place for over 30 years now, um, it's it's only enforced through lawsuits. And that's kind of how our system works. A law is created that has some ambiguity, and the courts hash out the details, which, in my opinion, is kind of a backwards system to use, but it's the system that we have. They say this has been about correcting a confusing policy which has caused untold problems for disabled people. For years, wheelchair users have been deterred from using vital public transport links because they could not be sure they will be able to get on. Today's judgment will make that easier. Yeah, it probably will. That's all I would like to talk about today. So thank you guys for watching. This has been Cripy News. I am the Pinkcrusader, and I hope you all have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you watch this. Take care.